Hello, everyone. Um, I want to echo what Christina said. I just want everybody to know we're not moving forward business as usual, but we did want to make sure that we offered classes and support and tools so that we can get people's voices out there. So that's the spirit in which we are here today, because these are just incredibly difficult times. Anyway, I'm going to try to give a little respite from that right now and talk about recording vocals. And my first question is, how many of you are watching this because you want to record your own vocals? Maybe just do a thumbs up or something. Or I am, yes, okay, I see you. Great, okay. Some and others. Well, we're gonna do both. I just wanted to see what the bulk of folks were interested in. Great, yay. Okay, I see y'all. So this is what we're gonna talk about today. Wait, where's my slide deck? There we go. The overview, kind of touch on all these things. The chances are pretty good I'll probably go over an hour, so I'll do my best to cram this all in, but there's a lot. So the things we have to think about when we want to record a very good vocal would be the recording chain, what components are we using in the recording chain, which of course is microphones, and the placement of the microphones, pop filters, preamps and audio interfaces, processing, and acoustics. So these are the things we're going to dive into right now. First up, let's understand what the chain is, because we want to have the purest pathway for our vocal, right? So our recording chain starts with the microphone, and the microphone's converting movement of the air into electrical energy. And so that first conversion, you can understand, we want to make sure we have a good microphone so that conversion into electrical energy is really good. And then the mic preamp, the quality of it is important because what it's doing is raising this tiny voltage level, because microphones are really sensitive, right? They have to move, they have to sense air movement. And you all know how that can be just the teeniest little movement. It has to convert that into an electrical form that is going to be understood by whatever's recording it. So it has to amplify it, it has to make that electrical energy greater in order for us to record it. The next piece is, how does it get converted from an analog movement of electricity to digital format? I'm just going to make the assumption that we're all on DAWs, on digital audio workstation today, just for today, okay? So we have to get it into this pristine digital format. So then that audio interface, or that A to D or analog to digital converter, the quality of that's going to affect what our recording is like. And then that's where it enters our digital audio workstation. So that's the recording chain. Excuse me. Of the 4 pieces, the first 3 are the ones, all of those are going to affect the quality of your recording. The DAW, maybe a tiny bit, but not that much. So honestly, I wouldn't worry too much about which workstation you're in, whether it's Pro Tools or Logic or Audition or in GarageBand for that matter. That piece, the software really isn't going to affect the quality that much. So I wouldn't obsess on that. The other 3, yes. Now let me, I'm going to kind of preface everything by the honest truth is that the bulk of a good vocal, like 99% of a good vocal recording, is the performance. So if you have an amazing vocal performance and a shitty microphone, it's going to be fine. Seriously. I mean, it's like the performance is everything. So I don't want everybody to trip on having to go out and buy all this stuff, when the reality is it's all about the performance. And I can tell you, I have had so many horrible vocal performances on $50,000 microphones, and there's nothing that microphone was going to do to make that okay. Vice versa, I've had mind-boggling, brought me to tears vocals sang into like you know, Radio Shack mic that sounded incredible. So let's just kind of like frame the conversation in this way before we start tripping on buying stuff. Okay. So that's my overview of not worrying too much. Now, there are things like how you do things that are free and, you know, that are going to make things better. So we're going to kind of focus more on that. So I don't want to get into a huge thing in the chat of, is this mic okay? Is this mic okay? Is this mic okay? Is that okay? Are all these things okay? I don't think that's the smart thing to discuss today, because probably all of them are fine. And I'm just going to give you examples of things so that you can kind of make your own decisions. So that being said, I could actually stop right here and just tell you 99% of the time you're going to use a large diaphragm condenser microphone in a cardioid pattern. And I'm going to break that down for you, but that's literally 99% of the time that's the case. So does anyone know why we're using large diaphragm condensers as opposed to small diaphragm condensers? Anyone want to weigh in on that? Frequency range, yes, partially, but there's a few, it's a little different, but I like that. I like that you jumped in there too right away. Dynamics creates wider area of sound. Okay, more lower end. Tone and warmth, catching more sound. Okay, I'm gonna break it down to you for you. Physics. Large diaphragm condenser microphones have a larger diaphragm, right? Which means more mass, which means it has slower transient response, right? So it takes a little bit more to make it move, and it's a slower response. So that sounds like it's a bad thing, but small diaphragm condensers have really fast transient response, are hyper responsive, and tend to then respond to things like sibilants and plosives much more than slow large diaphragm condensers, where we're just like, yes, it's slow, and yay, it missed that sibilance. That's a great thing. So it's really mostly about the transient response, and they do, because of the mass of the diaphragm, it does have a better low frequency response because it can stay in that slow resonant phase better than a small diaphragm condenser. So the one thing I can just say to you is, I mean, I'm not going to say never, but no small diaphragm condensers. And you can try it out for yourself. You get this great airy high frequency response, but the plosives and the sibilants are out of control. So I would just say that's a no. So iconic vocal mics, this is kind of like the gold standard. I'm showing you this just because historically speaking, these are the mics that everybody's trying to emulate. So people that build microphones, or how do I get Aretha Franklin's voice, or, you know, all of these things. These are the top 5. There's others, there's a couple others that we could throw in there, but these are the 5 that everybody really focus on, right? So everything from Neumann, the U47s and the U67s, you've heard on Sinatra, you've heard on Aretha Franklin, to AKG, the C12s, and the ELAM 251s. Those are great mics, especially for female vocals. You know, Barbara Streisand was definitely a huge proponent of 251s, and a lot of country music's on 251s. And then the Sony C800G, that's a more modern mic that you hear on most modern R&B, pop, rap, hip hop, you know, Rihanna. That's the sound of that modern kind of R&B and pop sound. So these are the ones that everything is kind of built on. Now, does anyone know what all of these have in common? They're expensive. Yes, they are totally expensive. I love it. They're not ribbons. They're all condenser microphones. All of these are large diaphragm condenser mics. Yes, they are like, no, that's true. They are all large diaphragm, and they are all expensive. Those are true. They're not all just cardioid. they're all tube mics. So they all, the conversion, the electrical conversion and the amplification is based on a tube. So that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean they're better. So don't get all tripped out on having to get a tube mic. These are the cheapest one of these is the reissue of the 67, which is still $6,000. So we're looking at $6,000 to $25,000 mics on this slide. I'm not doing this to say that's what you should get. I'm doing this so that you're educated in that everybody kind of is judging things against these benchmarks. And I'm telling you this in case you walk into a studio and say, and then they say, oh man, I want to put this ELAM 251 on you. And you don't go, no, I don't want that. You say, yes, 251, woo, let's do it. That's why I'm telling you this, not to be elitist or anything like that, just so that you know and you're aware of what everybody's judging things on, because these all do sound fantastic. So you don't, if somebody gives you one or that gives you access to one so that you're like, yes, I want that. Yes, please. That's great. I'm saying, I guess nobody's talked about, okay, sibilants and plosives. Sibilants is the S's and T's, like all the hissy stuff in human voice. Plosives are P's, T's, what else would it be? Anything, you know, like that. So again, things that are very loud very quickly, and sibilants is all the high frequency content in your voice. So you don't, these are the things that we don't like typically in a voice. So that's why we're picking microphones that don't accent that part of the human voice. So hopefully that answered that. I think that's it. Somebody got to use a C12 and it was spiritual. I would agree, 100%. So maybe something interesting, the C12 and the ELAM 251, they were huge competitors. They both use the same capsule. So they have kind of a similar, I don't know, color palette, if you will. They're very similar. Anyway, enough on that. We're gonna move on to, let's look at some things that we might be able to afford because otherwise it's all crazy. And again, I'm just showing you, wow, this is missing a picture here, isn't it? Where did that go? The 450s, it's invisible. I don't know what happened. Well, anyway, you'll know when you can look it up. That's embarrassing. So all of these we have at Women's Audio Mission. We've used all of them, so that's why I suggest them. If you don't have one of these, it doesn't mean that it's not good. It just means I might not have used it or be familiar. And like I said, it probably doesn't matter that much, but that's why I chose these. I'll tell you, the Mojave, the MA50 is it's kind of based on a U67. So that's something to know. The advanced audio, the CM47 is based on a U47. So it has that same color palette. And then Austrian Audio and the AKG, the C414s, they have the same capsule as the C12 and the 251. So they have a similar, you know, as similar as you can get with other things that are different to those microphones. So I would say, you know, this is an affordable range of microphones. I mean, again, if you start to get where you can make an investment in a reissue of a 251 or a 47, you know, Telefunken, all of those, or if you can afford the Neumann mics, 87s, you know, are more in the $3,000 range, that can work. But again, I'm trying to get things that are accessible to everyone. So any of these are going to be fine for you. That's all good. I love them all for different reasons, and I've used them all for different reasons. I'm just checking in questions. From the most affordable to most, how much difference does it? So it's really hard for me to articulate that, right? How much difference does it make? I don't know. It would depend on the vocalist. Honestly, like I said, you could put you know, an amazing vocalist on the cheapest one and no one's going to know the difference. Seriously. That being said, as somebody that was on the 251 that said it was spiritual, man, I don't have to work very hard when I have this expensive mic. So like it's a great investment. Like I've said to people, I've had microphones for over 30 years that have been a great investment that I made on those. I've used them on so many vocals. So, you know, I just want to get to that place where you start, you know, you might start with a cheap mic and 2 years from now you make an investment in a $5,000 mic. I don't know, you know, I think, but it definitely, I'm not going to lie to you, it does make a difference. So I'm not going to lie, but at the same time, I don't want to be like, you can't do this without the thing, because it's elitist and I hate that stuff. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. I'm really sorry that I know that $299 is a fortune for most people. Like, I have to start somewhere. Once you start honestly getting into like $99 condenser mics, it's not worth it. You should just save up and go for the $299. I'm just saying. That's kind of my limit right there. Or go for a dynamic. So we're heading in that direction too. Performance as a podcast. You can use the same mics in vocal performance as a podcast, but I'm not gonna, I wouldn't, if you're mostly doing vocals, I wouldn't limit yourself. All of these are good. Okay. Oh, there it is. The Audio Technica appeared. It had automation on it that I didn't know about or didn't check. There you go. So there's what and somebody said the 4050s are amazing. So all of these are amazing in some ways. So you can't really go wrong. Okay. Dramatic entrance. I love your jokes, people. I know I did. I was trying to be dramatic. That's what it was all about. You know, Audio Technica is going to be like, thanks for the dramatic entrance, Terry. We love you for that. It is a great mic. Okay, now there is maybe a 3% chance that a dynamic is better for you than a condenser mic. It happens. If you are a screamer, definitely condenser mics aren't your thing. Like if you're just going to straight up scream like punk rock style, we've had, I just switch it up and give them a handheld. Other reasons would be some folks are just more comfortable with a handheld microphone, you know, because they perform live mostly. And as I said, the performance is everything. Then I give them a handheld mic. Most people would suggest a 58. I have found that 57s work really well because they have a little bit more of a presence peak. So it gives it a little bit more definition if you are going to use a dynamic. But my favorite dynamic SM7s sound amazing on certain people. I will tell you Michael Jackson's vocals on Thriller. Many of those were on a Shure SM7, Metallica SM7, widely used. Again, there's your podcast mic if you want. Get awesome podcast mic. So SM7s are a great investment as well. I would say if you are trying to record vocals for people besides yourself, I would have one of each, right? So that you can cover both types of vocals on the fly. Because if you have somebody that just can't, it's not working on a condenser, you can switch to a dynamic. You know, there's some great stories like Bono from U2, like cutting some vocals with a 58 just because he wanted to sing handheld. Chrissy Hynde, you know, handheld once in a while because it just wasn't happening. So sometimes it's just a good way to switch it up. Why SM7 on Thriller instead of a condenser? Because Michael Jackson's voice just sounds great on an SM7. It just happened to work for that particular song. And again, every vocalist is different. So sometimes I go into a session and I think, oh yeah, this person's gonna be awesome on a 251. I put it up, it's not working. I usually put always 2 or 3, 4 mics up just to check, and I'm often surprised. We'll do a shootout and we'll all be like, whoa, didn't expect that. A great story with the Mojave, Mojave mics. I have a 67 myself that I was convinced was going to be amazing for the vocalist I was working with. We had a 67 up, we had a 251 up, and the Mojave, like everybody blindfolded picked it. And that's $1,000 mic, the one I have. And everybody was like, whoa. And so of course that vocalist like, I'm buying that microphone, because for her, that was the one. So, you know, that's the thing. I don't want to get like dogmatic on you have to have this particular mic because it's going to be different for every vocalist. So they're all fine. So don't worry too much about it. All right. Pickup pattern. This one is important. So you can use other things, but here's why. Your cardioid pattern is when it's picking up sound from the front of the microphone, and then it's starting to reject it from the sides and deeply rejecting it, not with a big notch at the rear of the microphone. The reason we want to use this is because typically we do not want any room interaction or reflections from the room entering and melding with the vocal. We want the vocal to be dry and unaffected. And especially if y'all are doing this in your bedrooms or in some non-studio acoustically treated room, you definitely want cardioid because you don't want any of that garbage in there, right? You just want your vocal. So it's really important that you have a cardioid pattern so that you're rejecting the other stuff in the room. Okay, so that's why I can just definitively say you're either picking a cardioid only mic or you're picking a mic that has multiple patterns and you're switching it into cardioid so that you don't get the rest of the room in your recording. So that's super important. So I have to start here because I don't know, this is just coming up more and more in my travels in my world. We have to know where the front of the microphone is. And y'all are gonna laugh at me, but I'm telling you, movies, commercials, I just see people singing into the wrong part of the microphone all the time. So it seems, this one seems obvious. There's the front, right? This one, maybe not. Side address, that's where the front is. So those are obvious ones, right? But let's look at some that aren't so obvious. So look at this, you guys, more drama. Boom, I remember this one. Okay, front address. See how these ones in yellow that are circled in yellow, they don't look like their front address. That top one looks like it's 421s are the one that everybody screws up on. 421s, everyone thinks it's side address and it's front address. The front of the microphone is where that arrow is pointing. And that doesn't seem intuitive, does it? Because I've seen it done wrong all the time. 57 is pretty obvious. RE20s though, it's like, could it be the front or is it all the grill things on the side? I don't know. Same thing with a funny story with the Heil with the PR30 when he first released those mics and he gave me some to try out for Wham. I wasn't sure where the front was. So I called him up. I was like, I'm really sorry, but is this a front? And he's like, you know what, I'm going to start putting it in the box. It's not obvious. So they started labeling where the front was, but it's a front address, but it could have been side address. So it's not a dumb question, right? But if you don't know, look it up. So don't be singing into the wrong part of the microphone for the whole time. Yikes. And the 84 and the ME100, it's pretty obvious, right? So that one's front address. Side address, mics. Okay, there's a Mojave. There's your Audio Technica. Now, it gets a little interesting because some of these, you can't really tell, like, well, no, you can. So I'm going to tell you what the clue is. The clue to these is where either the brand name or the badge or the pickup pattern marking is. That's the front of the microphone. Okay, so that's what you're looking for on the mic. Once in a while, I still get new ones where I'm like, huh, you know, where, and then I'll be like, oh, okay, there's the marking, that's the front. I mean, you can tell by if you speak into one side and the same distance from the capsule as the back side, it's going to be much louder. So that would be the test. But I mean, who wants to take the time to do that? So anyway, these are the things that one needs to know, because I can't tell you how many people I'm seeing singing into the wrong, and that's definitely not going to sound good. So let's get that part done right. so that we don't do something silly. You would think the logo would be on the opposite side for branding, wouldn't you? But it's not. Well, actually not, because they're trying probably to get the vocalist, right, to buy it. So the vocalist would be looking at that brand all day long. So maybe that's what it is. Why aren't you? There we go. I'm having so many technical difficulties today, you guys, I can't even tell you. All right, so distance. The distance, again, I cannot give you an exact number because it's different, obviously the style of vocal and all these things, but in your starting point is 7 to 12 inches or 18 to 30 centimeters. So it's kind of also, if you're not, I do this thing, can you see that? This is about 7 inches for most people, and I know everybody's hands are different, but this will get you in the ballpark from your mouth to the mic. So that's where you're gonna start. Let's talk about how you dial in the exact sweet spot for that. So the reason I wanna go over this is so that you all don't just dogmatically say, Terri said 7 to 12 inches, but you think about why you're doing this. So the closer that the vocalist is to the mic, the advantage to that is it's more intimate, which is great. And the other advantage would be less room is going to get into it because you're closer to the mic. That's great. The big disadvantage here is proximity effect, which I'll talk about in a second, which increases the low frequency response. And sometimes that's not, it makes it really muddy and boomy. So that's not a good thing. It can not be a good thing. So that's what you have to weigh in terms of, should I get closer or further away? So if you're working with a vocalist and it's really muddy and you're just like, whoa, then you need to back them off. Then they're too close, right? You're gonna have to sacrifice a little intimacy for getting the frequency response that you want. It can be an advantage. You might have a really thin sounding vocalist, so you might move them forward, say, well, I'm gonna get them to be a little bit closer to the microphone. So those are the things you're thinking about. So proximity effect is kind of a exaggeration of low frequency content when the microphone is close to a source. Now it doesn't create low frequency content, like it can't create it out of nothing, it just exaggerates it or amplifies it. So you can see here's a frequency response, the curves for a beta 58, and it's showing the bottom curve is at 2 feet and the top curve is at 1/8 of an inch, really close. And so it's showing you that the frequency so if you look at 50 hertz, the left-hand side of that graph, it's almost, what is that, 10, 20? Yeah, it's almost 20 dB different, or 20 dBs exaggerated than what it really is, right? So that's really making that boomy kind of voice of God experience when it's super close, right? So that frequency, low frequency response, you really want to see, like if it's too much, back off. If you want a little bit more, move them a little bit closer. That's what proximity effect is talking about. So something to think about when you're deciding how far away to be with that microphone. So the other thing about distance, so the further away from the mic, the advantage of that, like I said, it's more balanced frequency response because you don't have as much proximity effect at play. But the huge disadvantage here is that you have more room interaction, right? You've got way more room can get into your recording. So if you are recording like in your bedroom or something, especially, and it's really not acoustically treated and you realize it sounds really roomy, like you can hear the room, then you're gonna need to get closer to the microphone to diminish that. Now that being said, right, what the other huge thing that determines the distance is how loud is the person singing. So if they're just wailing, they're going to have to be way further back than 12 inches. So there's other factors here. Vice versa, if somebody's singing super quietly and you have your mic preamp cranked, then you're going to need to move them closer to the mic. And that, you deal with the proximity effect with EQ if you have to later. But So these are all of the things that you have to balance when you make that decision. You don't just put the mic up at 7 to 12 inches and walk away and don't think about it. That's your starting point. You start there and you go, yeah, that's not working, you know, or that's totally working. And especially if you're recording yourself, you can experiment forever, right? You can do one 7 inches away, do one a foot away, do one 3 inches away, and then listen to them and decide which one sounds better for you. You can make that experiment. If you're working on this for somebody else, they don't have time for that. So you have to be able to listen quickly and be like, that's not cutting it for me. I'm going to need to make some adjustments. So that's what we're talking about in terms of placement there. What are the kinds of things that you hear? Oh, so somebody's asking me what kinds of things you hear when you hear the room. It just means that you're hearing that it's reverberant, or you can, it sounds like the room is reacting. So if you only heard your vocal, it should sound like it's hermetically sealed, like it's dry, it doesn't have anything else happening. But if you feel like you're hearing reverberation in your room, or the effects of your room, you'll know it, and you want to make that not happen. Maybe one thing would be, if you listen, you know how if you listen to a really well-recorded podcast, the voice is very dry. Your voice should sound like that. Just not feeling like it's in a, not feeling like you can see the space. Like, I can see they're in a church because of the reverberation, right? If you're sensing that, there's too much room in it. So that's kind of thing. And somebody else, this is a great point, it would be also noise. Like if you're hearing buses and cars and you know, your roommate in the next room, then that's a bigger issue that we can't really solve with the microphone. But anyway, so these are all things to consider. Now, the bummer about when you back somebody off from the microphone, you know, again, you are going to get more of the room, but also the intimacy is gone. So if you have a song where the lyric or the intent of the song is for it to be delivered very closely and intimately, then you're going to have to move closer to get that feeling. So again, a lot of thought goes into this when somebody does it, and when it's done well, it's mind-blowing. You're just like, oh, that vocal is just so good. So take the time to experiment with this so that you learn what works best for your voice. And then if you're working professionally, that you learn what works best for other people's voice, because that's what they're looking for you to do for them. Are there times when you would want to keep in the reverb from the space versus adding reverb in after? Very, very rarely. I really, really don't want to make that call because I don't know what the mix is going to be like. Because okay, there are plugins that take some of the reverb out, but it horribly affects everything else. So professionally, no, I just want a dry vocal. I want a really nice dry vocal to deal with. It might be the one time it might come into play would be like opera, and you're recording it in a very specific, you know, a church or an acoustic space or chamber. That might be the case, but boy, is that risky because it's in your vocal the whole time. So I would say for the, since I think we're on the beginner side of things here, I would say definitely no, we don't want it in there. So those, but there are times, but just remember, once it's in there, it's always in there, and it's not coming out. So it happens and people do it. And again, I don't want to say be dogmatic, like about, I can give you exceptions to every single thing I say today, but I'm just trying to give you like, why, let's not go exceptions. Let's go with what generally works so that you're on the quickest path to doing this well, instead of like tweaking out on exception. That's what I'm trying to do, right? Experimentation should only come after you have a solid foundation that you're confident you can do this perfectly every single time, then start experimenting. But I would head for like, we know this works, let's do it and get the best thing we can, the quickest way we can. Are All right, so that's the distance thing. I also will tell you, I would not waste my time on this thing. People talk about, oh, if you have a lot of sibilants, have the singer sing off access. I hate that. I just like why would we make a singer do something when they're trying to just emote? So I've tried everything, trust me. So I'm a strong proponent of having the mic just face the vocalist dead on where their mouth is. I've tried, trying to affect kind of the tonal quality of people's voices by raising the mic or lowering the mic. If you raise it, you can sometimes point it and get more of the chest and avoid some of the sibilants. If you lower it, you can do the same thing and point it up more towards, if you want to get more of the mid-range of like a head voice kind of thing. But I'm going to tell you, they never work. They have never worked for me because the vocalist is always moving then to sing into the mic. So they're ruining their vocal cords by either lifting their head up or pushing their head down. So I've just abandoned ship on all of those because I've never really, they did kind of help, but I think they hurt the vocalist more. And like I said, if you go back to the tenet of what's the actual thing that affects things the most, it's the performance. So I abandoned ship on those a long time because they were way more affecting performance than they were helping with the tonal balance of what I was trying to capture. So I would just keep it simple, point it at your mouth, it's all good. And that's the way to do it. So, people will tell you all different kinds of things with that, but most people that do this for a living that's not what they're spending time on. So, again, feel free if you want to do it yourself, but I would just say, keep it simple, point it at the mouth and experiment more with the distance than anything else. I think I'm caught up on questions. Okay. I always use a pop filter. There's people that don't. It does affect a little bit of the frequency response, but everything else is way more important to me. The sibilants and plosives that it prevents it's significant. So that's why. Second big one, it protects the microphone. I'm just going to tell you, especially like really expensive condenser mics that we're saying $6,000 to $25,000. I need to protect that capsule from spit. I just do. I can't have everybody spit on there all the time. So, and with COVID, come on, we can't even clean stuff really. So pop filters are just really seriously a no-brainer. You should just put a pop filter on there. The other thing, if you're working with a lot of different vocalists, it provides that boundary, that physical boundary of like, nope, can't get any closer to the microphone. So I always have it about 3 inches away from the microphone, so they can't get any closer than that. And I'm including myself in this. I'm a vocalist, so I like to know, okay, there's, because if you're really into it, you're not really looking where you are in relation to the microphone. So it's nice to have that thing like, oh, well, I'm getting close. Okay, so it's just a good physical boundary. I really like all the metal pop filters as opposed to the fabric ones for 2 reasons. One, they're obviously easy to clean and they're cleaner. And 2, they have the perforations are kind of fluted, so the dispersion is, I should say, well, dispersion's right too. Diffusion is a little bit better than the cloth variety. So it kind of directs the air away from the microphone in a more balanced way. I just think it's a great investment. And as a vocalist, I used to carry my own pop filter. So I knew somebody's germs wasn't on my pop filter. So there you go. Any of these 3 work amazing. I think I have all of these. Yes, I do. So they're all great. Pick one and you'll be fine. So that's my thoughts on that. Okay, so up until this point, we talk about the microphone, the placement and the quality of it. And now we have to talk about how are we going to get that into electrical form. This is a little bit hard to talk about. I'm assuming, and this might be a horrible assumption, that you're all, if you're recording at home, you're probably just using an audio interface. So the microphone preamp would reside in your audio interface. If you're in a studio, oftentimes we're using external preamps that are going into A to D converters that are going into Pro Tools. So that's kind of a step up in quality. That starts to get more in quality there. So probably you all are, am I right? How many of you are just are intending to record right into your audio interface? You can just say yes. Yep, 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 yep. Okay. You guys are fun. I love watching these comments. I can just watch comments all day. I love the chat. Thank you. Okay. Well, okay. So then here's the thing. Your preamp is inside your audio interface. So unfortunately, it means your audio interface is determining the quality of your preamp. So again, if you want to kind of look at the range of audio interfaces, I went over that in the Home Studio 101, which is on YouTube now, I think. Definitely we recorded it, so I think it's up there. So I'm not going to get into the whole range of which ones, but just note that the amount of money you're spending on your audio interface is determining the quality of that preamp, and it's probably fine. But I'm just saying that wanted to up your game, that's what you should start looking at, is the quality of your audio interface. So you can see here's a universal audio arrow. We have a lot of these type different UA interfaces, and you can see the button there that says preamp. So that's telling you the preamp is inside of there. And so, oh, okay, wait. Yeah, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Sorry. So that's inside your audio interface, and that's all good. The second alternative, if you're doing this externally, you would have an outboard. You'd have an outboard mic preamp, and this is kind of the gold standard. To be honest, like almost everybody, when they're talking about an outboard mic pre, the most probably widely used on vocals would be a Neve 1073. Everybody's trying to imitate it. This is about $4,000. You may not want to do that. So the thing to note that I see going wrong drastically here is if you're using an outboard external microphone preamp, you need to make sure you're bypassing the preamp in your interface if you're going to use it with your interface. Otherwise, you've got two gain stages, two noise inducing places. Makes zero sense to do that. I see people do that all the time, and it's just wrong. I'm just going to say flat out, it's wrong. You'd be better off just using the one preamp stage in your audio interface than buying this $4,000 thing and then having two gain stages in a row. Makes no sense. Okay, so either use your audio interface or use an external one and plug it into the line input so that it's bypassing the mic preamp. Okay, because the two things will not mix. You're going to have distortion at the wazoo. So you have to make sure that you're, so again, I would say this is later down the road, if once you know how to use your audio interface really well and your vocals sound pretty amazing, then start looking at these external options that are expensive. So that's what I would think about. But this is, if you are, here are some more affordable options. I'm absolutely in love with the Great River. It's a kind of a modern version of a Neve preamp. I love it because it's got metering on it. I also, the guy that makes these is just like, I don't know, the nicest person on the planet. And I think we have 4 of these at Wham that are just used every day. So I love the Great River. We also love the Millenniums. We have those at Wham. Millennia is a different feel. It's very clean. It's super pristine. So it doesn't have some of the grit you can get out of a Neve, and it doesn't have kind of more mid-range focus of the Neve. It's very accurate. Either of these are brilliant. Can't go wrong. So if you are heading in that direction, these are some great options. But I think more importantly, let's talk about using our interfaces properly. Phantom power, another thing I just see being done all the time. This is a surefire way of running your microphones if you're not using it well. So if you have a non-tube mic, which I'm going to assume most of you are because all of those tube mics that I had up there are really expensive, you'll know that you have a tube mic because it will come with its own power supply box. And it's kind of this big, heavy box that will come with it that you'll have to plug it into. That's how it gets its power. All the other condenser microphones are getting their power from something called phantom power. It's called phantom power because it's being fed down one of the wires of your microphone cable so you don't see it. It's 48 volts, so it's either going to be labeled 48 volts or phantom. So you can see each of these has a different label, so you have to be able to recognize where it is. And again, as I said, it's for non-tube condenser mics, and you need to know how to turn it on and off properly or you're going to damage your microphone. So let's talk about how we do that. First, the other thing you're going to damage are your speakers, not necessarily your headphones, but your speakers. So this is why it has to be done right. Before you ever turn it on, you want to make sure your headphone volume and your monitors are turned all the way down or off. You want to make sure phantom power is starting out off, and then plug in your microphone. Only after the microphone is plugged in do you turn on phantom power. And the reason for that is that it does a slow ramp up to 48 volts so that the capsule of the microphone doesn't see all that voltage at one time as a spike. So if you had phantom power on and you plug the microphone in, it's going to see 48 volts instantaneously, and there's a much greater risk of damaging your capsule or other components prior to the capsule. So you don't want that to happen. Okay, so that's just really be conscious of phantom power and is it on or off. I see people just plug in stuff and I'm like, oh my God, you're gonna break things. Don't do it. So that's, now that it's on, we got to figure out how to turn it off, right? So that we don't break stuff. So there you go. So always, before you start clicking that phantom button, you're always checking to see if your volume of your headphones or your monitors are down. Only then can you turn off, because it makes a pop, and like you yourself are going to be annoyed by that pop. But worst case, if you have clients, they don't want to have a loud pop in their headphones, right? So again, you want to turn it off so it can ramp back down, and then you can unplug it. So again, don't just unplug it when phantom power is on, or you're going to potentially damage your microphone. So this phantom power thing, that's seemingly unimportant, but actually very important. So that's something you want to really take into consideration. The next thing is we got to make sure we're setting levels properly, because to me, that's like the most important thing of all of this that we can control, and it's free, right? We don't have to worry about it paying for this. So since most of you are on your audio interfaces, hope they don't all have meters, which is kind of a bummer. So you want to make sure you're turning up the gain on your audio interface so that it should just be peaking with the yellow light, and they're all labeled differently, so I don't have a way to tell you what the number is, but you can see like preamps don't often even have a number. Some of them will say -9, some will say 0. It's all over the place. So I'm just going to say it should just be like hinting into the yellow occasionally. If you're popping into the red all the time, you definitely don't want to push things in the digital realm, because it does clip. It's not saturating. It literally lops off the top of your waveform. Okay, so you don't want that. It's not even fun. It's not cool, fun, distorted, grungy. It's none of those things. It's just bad, right? So make sure you're not in the red at all. You should have 0 red lights ever flashing in the digital realm. Okay, so that's one thing. And then you got to make sure that when you're in your DAW, that the average level is around -18 dBFS, and that means decibels full scale. In the digital realm, it's a little different. So your peaks should just be at your peaks, right? So this is interesting. Your peak should be at 0, not average, okay? So if this isn't matching up to your audio interface or your mic pre, then this isn't calibrated right. You need to go adjust that at the audio interface. Don't turn the fader down in your DAW. That's not going to fix it. You got to go back to your interface, turn that down so that your DAW is reading, you know, average -18. That's the place that's the unity place of digital recording, where we're not going to clip or add anything or diminish anything. That's its place. I think I had a whole slew of questions here. If your preamp is built into the interface, does the phantom power? No, phantom power does not automatically turn on or off. If you don't have meters on your amp, can you use the master fader in the DAW as a guide with the track? No, so you're going to use the channel fader in the DAW as your guide. That's a very good question. So if you don't have a meter on your audio interface, you're going to be turning up the gain and watching the meter on the channel of the DAW that you're recording on. So like one of these channels that I'm showing here, you're watching that meter while you're turning up the. But the reason I want you to start with, if there is a meter on your audio interface, that you're not overloading that meter first, because then it's distorting there, right? Even if, and that's going to affect what's shown at in your DAW.
Terri, I'm just going to jump in for 1 second. This is Christina. I know that we are running close to noon. So we're going to, I know things are going so quickly and you all have such good questions. But it looks like we have a lot of great questions and we want to take them. So we're going to extend a little bit past the hour if you're able to join us. If you have to drop off, no worries. We're going to record this session and have it on our YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you know when it's up there. And if you do have to drop off, we hope that you can give us some quick feedback. I'll pop that link in the chat. But if you can stay, we are going to keep going for a little bit longer. So please stay on if you can and keep the questions coming.
Thank you, Christina, for keeping me on track as always. Okay, this was an important question. If you have a vocalist that really belts parts of a song out and then goes quiet, I do try to record those separately. If you can't, like, sometimes you can't, because sometimes it's like there's this lead into it and it's just too organic and beautiful that you can't. In which case you always set the levels to the loudest thing. So this you do for yourself or you do for your talent. You say, okay, can you go to the loudest part of the song and sing it? You're going to set your levels to that. Because you don't want that. That's going to obviously peak. If it's the type of thing where you can cut them separately, definitely cut them separately, because that will make your life a lot easier. Let's see. Be down when you're turning. Yeah, you should. Always when you start out, everything should be down. Your gain and your volume of your headphones. The loud pop used to haunt my dreams. Oh, okay, yeah, don't have the loud pop, because why have bad dreams? That's what I say. Okay, I think I'm going to keep moving along, but maybe Christina and Belle will pop whatever questions I missed at the end. Okay, so we've got our level. This level thing, though, is huge in terms of the way things sound. To give you an example, right, if you listen to vocals from like where there was not a lot of technology, like the 60s, right? And it's like gorgeous vocals. Then you have to think to yourself, wow, all they did was they were the gain structure, the way that they set their levels was just so perfect. So I always think about that. I'm like, we can do a lot more with little. And so I would worry more about setting my levels properly and having the distance between the vocalist and the mic perfect, and not worry so much about all the gear. That's my advice. Okay, headphones. One thing you need to know about headphones, you need to have closed back headphones. If you have open back headphones, everything's going to bleed into your microphone. I see this mistake a lot. They don't have closed back headphones on that go over the ear. So that's an investment you're going to need to make, unfortunately, because open back's not going to help you. A few headphone mix tips. If the vocalist is singing sharp, that means they're pushing really hard. So you want to bring the vocal, turn the vocal up in the mix so they don't push so hard. Conversely, if they're singing flat, you probably want to turn the vocal down in the mix so they push a little bit harder and get up to pitch. My big tip for everyone on the planet Earth, my favorite one is sing without reverb. I really think reverb's a crutch. Every vocalist I've worked with has thanked me for doing this. They were really mad at me when I made them do it, but you're just so much more pitchy if you have reverb on because it's a time-based effect. So it's creating something that you're going to fight in your listening perception brain in terms of singing on pitch. Second thing would be if you as a vocalist or your vocalist is able to create this beautiful vocal with nothing on it, you know that you're doing great, right? So that's why I never use reverb ever. Sorry, I'm hardcore about it, but it's worked really well for me. The processing, I can make this super simple. No processing. You shouldn't be EQing on the way in. You shouldn't be compressing on the way in unless you absolutely know what you're doing, and you should track it dry. Do not print reverb on anything ever because you can't get it back out. You can print it on a separate track. That's fine. I don't even do that. So simple question or simple answer to this question is no processing. I can't stress this enough. The vocal should sound amazing dry. It just should. If it doesn't, something's wrong. You have the wrong mic, you're not doing something right. It really should. A good vocalist comes in, it's dry, you're like, oh, this is a dream. I go to mix it, it only gets better. The opposite would be if you've got all this delay and crap on it, you don't know what you really have. And then if somebody else mixes it, they're going to be like, what the hell did you do to this thing? All right. We don't know what is really there when you put all that stuff on it. So simple thing is track it with nothing and you're going to be absolutely fine. Room acoustics. If you have horrible room acoustics, it's going to be hard for you to get a good vocal track. Some things that you can do would be SE makes a reflection filter. It helps a little bit. It doesn't help tons. I do use them at the Wham has a couple at the studio. I do like to use them. It adds a little extra dryness when I need it, like especially for a voiceover or something like that. If you have a horrible room, like it's super reverberant, I would invest, it would cost you a couple $100, but invest in some Owens Corning 703 and get some fiberglass up into your room. It can really suck up a lot of the resonance in a room. So that's something that you're going to want to consider when you're doing all this. I think I'm at the end. Okay, how far over? I'm only 5 minutes over. I think that's not too bad. Okay, questions. Okay, close back for recording and post mixing, or so use it. No, I don't. I use closed back headphones all the time. Now that being said, Audie's just sent me some open back headphones that I do really like. I have to say, whoa, they're pretty amazing, but they're super expensive, but they're amazing. I don't mix with headphones on. That would be the other thing. My other tip would go to the home studio one and watch that. You should only be checking on headphones, like your edits and your reverb tails, things like that. Will you talk about latency when monitoring? How to reduce? Well, you want to know how I reduce latency is I use HD Pro Tools. That's the big, when people are like, why would anybody want to spend so much money on Pro Tools and HDX? It's like, oh my God, because there's no latency. That's why. Well, latency is going to be a buffer setting. That's like a whole nother thing. You got to look into your buffer settings if you want to really get that down to nothing. How would you make opera singer in a theater? Are we recording it? Honestly, then you're starting to look at a different type of microphone. So that's a longer conversation. How many times do you record a vocalist on one song? Oh, okay, simple. Definitely more than one take. It depends on the vocalist, but you know, at least 3. I want to have at least 3 takes I can pick from to come together. I can't really, I don't know, but how bad is it to have you? It's not bad. Like I said, I'm anything's fine, but I'm not a huge fan of USB mics because everything's all in that one package. If that's what you have though, make it work. How important are the sound absorbing panels in the studio? This is tough. Loving studios so much, the sound absorbing panels are super. The acoustics in a recording studio, that's what is the value of a recording studio, is everything's really flat. So that's why I love recording in recording studios, because the acoustics are amazing. Do you double the main voice? Not necessarily. That's a mixing choice and it's a production choice. It's not done all the time. If you have a great vocalist, I would never do it. Layering vocals and harmonies, production again. So layering vocals and harmonies, awesome, but it's a production choice. If that's yours choice, I'm not exactly sure if it's like you're asking me whether to do it. Why shouldn't you use foam to absorb sound? Foam only absorbs high frequency content, so your room becomes, the frequency balance of your room becomes worse than it was before. The Owens Corning, that thickness of fiberglass is meant to absorb across the entire frequency spectrum, so your room is more balanced. Why shouldn't you? Okay, what is the most important thing to get into while mixing main vocals with background vocals? Well, when you mix main vocals, you want to make sure that the background vocals are more processed than your main vocal, right? Because reverb and delays are what create the space around that vocal. And so generally speaking, in the time frame, you're pushing the background vocals behind the main vocals. So they probably have a little bit more delay or reverb on it in the mix to separate them so that the main vocal is, you know, clear and has its own space. Thoughts on Chaotica? I have not used Chaotica, so I don't know what that is. I know what it is, but I have not used it, so I can't recommend anything I haven't used. All I can say is Owens Corning is cheap, and it's used in almost every recording studio has Owens Corning in it. So it's a highly tested and used thing, and it's cheap. You can go to the store, you know, go to the home, not now. Wow, I forgot we're in COVID for a minute. But eventually you could go and get some at Home Depot and or online. So I cover a lot of that in the Home Studio 101 YouTube video. Can you go back to, yes, I can, I think. Go back to the last slide. There you go. Thoughts on M audio interfaces? They're fine. They're fine. Again, it's like you're going to want to start to do some research because the audio interface quality does affect the quality of your preamp. So, you know, when you're looking at all the ones that are like $99 and then you see like, you know, there's audio interfaces and A to D converters that are like $20,000. Obviously, since if people are paying $20,000 for it, there is some value in it. So you're going to have to find out where you fall in that value. Like, are you willing? Is an investment? Like for me, it was like buying certain things were an investment because I was getting more and more work, and I needed to make sure the quality of my work kept up with certain things. And that's why studios are like, oh, we have to have this to keep up. So I don't want to lie to you that it doesn't matter, but I also want you to make sure you create things. So if that's what you have, make it work. And then you'll at some point run out of steam with it. Thoughts on, okay, on placing it. That's a really long conversation. Generally corners and places where you're getting reflections.